the title of my paper was The Paradox of Power, Athena's Gender Identity, and the Autonomy of the Virgin Goddess. So today I'm going to explore the paradox at the heart of one of Greece's most influential deities, Athena. This goddess is most known for her rule over the realms of wisdom and warfare. She displays masculine power while being a virgin goddess in a highly patriarchal society. This presentation will explain how Athena's virginity, gender fluidity, and symbolic roles allow her to both challenge and reinforce gender norms of the time. My thesis was that Athena's identity as a virgin goddess reflects a paradox of gender in ancient Greek society and mythology. While she embodies traditional masculine traits of warfare, wisdom, and political authority, her perpetual virginity allows her to maintain autonomy in a highly patriarchal society, positioning her as both a challenge and a reinforcement of gender norms in ancient Greeks. This paradox, power through virginity, masculinity within femininity, authority without sexuality, is central to understanding how Athena functions in Greek myth and culture. Before we dive into this research, we must define what mythology is for all of you who aren't Greek myth nerds. Mythology is the collective stories told by a culture to explain, understand, and give meaning to the world it inhabits. From mother goddess to patriarchy. To understand what ancient Greek society was like, we must first look at its roots in Indo-European societies. The Greeks were a civilization that descended from the larger ancient Indo-European societies, which often portrayed women as powerful, especially in their ability to create life. The virgin was revered because she embodied potential. She had power not yet controlled by a husband or pregnancy. Women were seen as powerful in all stages of their life in this society, as a maiden or a virgin, a mother, and a crone, or like a hag. But as Greek society formed and drew from its ancestors' myths, the emerging patriarchy reframed the views. Myths like Pandora's box emphasized that female curiosity was dangerous and chaotic. According to the myth, the first woman, Pandora, was given a box but was told not to open it. But overcome by curiosity, she opened it, releasing all the evils of the world, such as sorrow, disease, and of course, death. Only hope remained trapped inside the box, which she quickly closed the lid. Virginity became something to guard obsessively because it guaranteed paternity and limited women's autonomy. Athena emerged inside this evolving cultural landscape as a goddess in their mythology. First, we'll dive into the importance of virginity in Greek society. Virginity as social control. We need to define virginity in the context of ancient Greece. Though it's similar to Christian virginity, still it's different. Virginity in this context means an unmarried girl or young woman, often still under her father's roof, but it also encompasses the state of sexual inexperience and purity, which is crucial for marriage and societal order. While generally implying a lack of sexual relations, its focus shifted from just the hymen to a broader concept of maidenhood, purity, and being unbelonging to a man. In this notion, men could technically not be considered virgins. Virginity was imagined as a physical object that could be taken or stolen, and many myths describe it in these terms. For example, in the myth of Persephone, Hades' wife, before her sexual purity was violated or stolen, she was known as Kore, which means maiden, but as she transitioned into wife and woman, her name also changed with her to Persephone. This reflects the Greek anxiety about women's sexuality and lineage. Men needed to be sure that a child came from them. With women, it's known that it's your child since it came from your body. But with men, it was never a guarantee and no way to know that a child was yours unless it came from a virgin. Paternity needed to be known due to the fact that Athenian law, and as well as many other city-states, they required all assets to be passed to male heirs. Virginity was a maiden's value in this time period, and it's what she brought to a marriage. Interestingly enough, only goddesses could be celibate, never gods. This reveals the double standard that male gods can express their sexuality freely, but female deities' power is often tied to their sexual restraint, which leads to virginity as autonomy. Remaining a virgin allowed Athena daily freedom that mortal women lacked. She could interact with men without sexual threat or obligation. While many goddesses suffered sexual violence, the virgin goddesses were largely spared, although there are some cases where they were victims of sexual violence. Virginity also allowed her to navigate and influence masculine spheres, especially in her role as a protector of heroes, without compromising her symbolic purity and having romantic and sexual feelings towards these heroes. There are 3 goddesses which are immune to the lustful powers of Aphrodite, unlike the other gods and goddesses who can be swayed by her power: Artemis, Athena, of course, and Hestia. The 3 are known as the virgin goddesses. Each goddess upholds her virginity for different reasons and are vastly different from each other, which is described in the Homeric hymn 5 to Aphrodite. Yet there are 3 hearts which she cannot bend nor ensnare. First is the daughter of Zeus, who holds the aegis, bright-eyed Athena, for she has no pleasure in the deeds of golden Aphrodite, but delights in wars and in the work of Ares, in strifes and battles, and in preparing famous crafts. Now I want to talk about Parthenos. The term Parthenos is a word that it has an unknown origin, but it's most often used to refer to sexual virginity. However, it can also mean unmarried maiden, and it also describes one of Athena's many roles and titles: Athena Parthenos, or Athena the Virgin, or Athena the Maiden. When it's applied to her, it carries a heavy symbolic weight of purity, autonomy, inviolability, and it becomes a religious identity. Now we're going to move on to talking about the polis, or Athens. Athena represents Athens itself, which she was the patron goddess of after she won the favor of the citizens against the god of the sea, Poseidon. Her virginity mirrors the city's purity and its independence. If she were to marry or to engage sexually, it would symbolically undermine the political integrity of Athens. The paradox is striking here. Men were expected to imitate this goddess and follow in her footsteps, while women were expected to obey the restrictive gender roles placed in this society. Now touching on Athena's birth and her masculinity. Athena was born directly from Zeus, emerging fully formed and fully armed. This unusual birth accomplishes 2 things. It reinforces Zeus's supremacy, and it gives Athena an inherently masculine origin. Her wisdom and her martial skills come packaged in a form that never passed through a female body, distancing her further from fertility and the traditional womanhood and roles. Though there are some versions of the myth that state that Zeus impregnated Metis, a titan, to prevent a prophecy from coming to fruition, he swallowed her whole, because why wouldn't we? I do want to note that Metis in Greek means wisdom or skill, so he not only consumed a woman, but a titan of wisdom. So even though she has a mother in this myth, she still doesn't pass through a female body. It all comes from a male. Her relationship with the Zeus, her closeness to Zeus being his favorite child, and her masculine domains, which more on that later, raises her in the divine hierarchy. But her virginity removes her from the rivalry of the sexual politics, making her powerful, but never threatening to Zeus's authority as king of the gods. Her masculine domains. She governs areas that are considered inherently masculine: rational thought, warfare, and civil leadership. She represents the civilized, strategic aspect of war, not its emotional brutality, which is associated with Ares. She's also the protector of heroes. She typically takes them under her wing and guides them through their many trials and tribulations. This aligns her with male-coded intelligence and courage, qualities that many ancient authors used to define masculinity itself. Though she does have one female domain, which is weaving. This skill was one domain that was used, that women was the highest skill that they could have because of how detail-oriented and time-consuming it was. However, this domain can also be seen as a metaphor for how she weaves the plan of wars. So you're taking her one feminine domain and turning it masculine again. She remains alone with her more masculine features and domains, but finds her femininity in other parts of her life, such as the spinning and weaving. Athena and gender fluidity. She exhibits traits of both genders. She is biologically a goddess, but her identity is shaped by her virtues. So once again, the strategy, courage, and intellect, which Greeks coded as masculine. She oscillates between both female and male characteristics. She's physically portrayed as more masculine as well. Instead of having the round fullness typically associated with women and mother goddesses, she is slender with narrow hips, which are inherently masculine. Though she has these male characteristics, she is still feminine as well. Greek social thought often judged gender by behavior rather than anatomy, so Athena becomes the ideal man while still being female. She is in some ways one of the closest things Greek myths have to a genderqueer figure. She is unapologetically combining masculine authority with feminine symbolism. Athena shows up in myth quite a lot. In epic poetry, she constantly guides male heroes. She was the strategist of the Trojan War, in which she guided the Greeks against the Trojans. Fun fact, the Trojan horse ties into the strategy of war, and guess who came up with that? Odysseus. More on him in a second. In the Odyssey, which is an epic poem by Homer, it tells the tale of the perilous journey of Odysseus and his crew following the Trojan War as they try to get home to the Greek island of Ithaca. Odysseus was her favorite hero by far. He was known as the clever one, and he won her over with his wit. So, of course, she took him under her protection and wing. She helps Odysseus navigate dangers, especially dangers posed by women. Specifically when CeCe turns his men to pigs, or when he faces the monster Scylla. Due to this, the Odyssey testifies to the importance of women without straying far from the male-dominated ideology of Greece. This reinforces the patriarchal norms, even as she herself subverts them. She is both a challenger and an enforcer of these gender roles. Back to sexuality. Ancient Greek culture assumed sexuality as a given, especially for the gods. They were very lustful, though the Greeks were rather prudish, especially compared to their later Roman counterparts. The gods indulged in many sexual endeavors. Athena's lifelong celibacy breaks from this norm. It elevates her above the chaos of desire and places her in a realm of pure intellect and strategy. She's described as quite awkward in situations involving love and sex, which may be due to her reverence for intellect or even due to the concept that asexual and celibate beings were seen as inhuman. And these situations can bring in emotions that complicate the mind. As a goddess, she is above all carnal emotions associated with sexual and romantic relationships. She aiding in an explanation for her explained awkwardness in situations revolving around all these emotions. The paradox. Athena exists at the crossroads of gender ideology. She defies norms. She's a woman who possesses masculine power, yet at the same time, she reinforces them. She upholds patriarchy, aids male heroes, and asserts the superiority of masculine values. Virginity is the key to her paradoxical identity. It offers her personal autonomy, political authority, and symbolic purity, all without challenging male dominance outright. My findings, by examining Athena's virginity, domains, and symbolic functions, we see a goddess who embodied the tensions of Greek society. She reveals how gender, sexuality, and power were negotiated in myth, and how the divine world offered ways to imagine identities that weren't actually possible in the mortal world. This goddess remains an eternal virgin to give her power and respect in a patriarchal society, making her such a revered deity. She remains a virgin goddess who avoids the realm of sexuality and the divided loyalties of motherhood and marriage. She remains loyal to the values that are important to her character and story, staying dedicated to her spheres of influence. She valued all intellectual endeavors and wisdom above everything else. Thus, she chose to make this vow to chastity, as well as freeing herself from any potential romantic journeys. Any questions? Morgan,
What drew you to this subject?
so I went to Anne when I was talking about my honors project. I went, I want to do something with mythology because it's like a hyperfixation subject of mine. And I said, I don't know really what I want to do, but I was like, I want to do something with Athena and gender, but that's like so broad that it was like we need to narrow it down. And when I was looking into it further, Athena as a virgin goddess doesn't have a lot of research on it, so I was like, let's go that route. So yeah, that's how I got to this. Kira.
How do like Athena's children like factor into that? Because I think there's more, but the only one I can really think of is Daedalus. Like, how does that like factor into her being the
So we're gonna get nitty gritty up in here. So Hephaestus was her only like candidate for marriage, and there's stories that he went to sexually assault her, and when he did, the semen landed on her thigh, in which she brushed off, and then the earth, Gaia, got pregnant from it, and she raised him up as like a stepchild. So she's not biologically he's not biologically her child. She just raised him as one. So her virginity is still protected through that. Carly.
What were some of your favorite sources when you were looking into this material?
There's this one paper that I used heavily that is virginity and asexuality in Greek myth. And it was so interesting. It touches a lot on Athena and Artemis and specifically comparing them and their virginity and kind of inferring that they're asexual beings. And it was just really interesting to read, and I got a lot of my research from it.
Can you send me that?
Yeah. Yeah, I can.
Just like send us your references list and we'll
There's a
Just the
lot.
whole citation.
I
Oh.
want to read them.
Lily?
Do you feel that this representation of femininity and masculinity by Athena is done like very well? Like, do you like how she is represented, or do you feel like she's a good representation of the masculine and feminine, or do you feel like she is a poor representation? Like, how do you personally feel about that?
I think she does it well, but it's the issue, she's not a perfect balance.
Yeah.
Because she is a goddess, but like most of her characteristics are masculine. And she low-key hates women. Like she punishes them more often than she does men, versus like when you look at Artemis, it's like she protects women and hates men. So I think those two like kind of are counterparts in a way, but I am just biased to Athena because I think specifically in the modern world, we look at her and we go, okay, so women can be smart and can take on these more masculine characteristics, but I'm framing it from that lens is kind of like, oh, so she was a man, she was the ideal man, but as a woman, which is kind of like, but she's more masculine than feminine, so that balance doesn't really equal out. Does that make sense, or am I just rambling?
I get what you're saying, yes.
Thank you.
And I kind of feel like if she had ever, say, married Hephaestus and had a child, she would have lost her integrity.
Yes.
Do you agree?
Yes, because the thing I found that I really think is the reason she remained a virgin is that she is completely dedicated to her spheres of influence, and if she did get married, that would take focus away from her spheres of influence, and then tying in the poles again, the integrity of Athens is then compromised as well. So her as a symbol for Athens, we're trying to say Athens is a city that is inviolable, like it's protected and pure, but we bring a marriage into that and it gets rid of that completely. Stephanie Mercedes?
In your research, did you find anything like that, I don't know, indicated that she ever sort of wavered or struggled with her desire to remain a virgin? Did she ever consider marrying or like romantic entanglements or things like that?
She at first considered a candidate for marriage, but then that changed rather quickly because like Hephaestus was her candidate for marriage, but she like looked at that god and went, disgusting, no. And then after that, she wasn't a candidate anymore, and there was no other situations that she was put in where she was like, yeah, I'm gonna get married. Like that just wasn't her at all. But that was the only instance that I found where it kind of strayed away from that identity. Morgan?
Was there, and it's okay if not, this is only somewhat tangentially related, but isn't Hephaestus the one who Hera like births out of her
Yeah.
by herself?
Yeah.
So it's interesting putting like the one that's like asexual from Zeus with the one who's asexual from Hera. And I don't know, was there any talk about that, or that's
Well,
kind of unrelated?
It's, well, because originally the myth is that Zeus, well, it depends on what myth you look at. Zeus thought of Athena and then said, yeah, she's a thing. So she pops out of his head. And then Hera gets mad because she's like, well, if he can reproduce asexually, I can too. But Hephaestus comes out disabled, and then she throws him off a cliff because she's like, gross, whatever. So putting those two together was interesting, but I didn't really dive into that much in my research, but I like the connection you formed. Lily?
How do you, as you're talking, I was thinking about like Hestia, because if I remember, I think she also remains some of it.
Yeah.
But she's like very represented as like motherhood,
Mhm.
you know, in the heart. So like, how do you think that compares with this one celibate goddess who represents motherhood, and Athena, another celibate goddess who's very anti-motherhood?
Well, when I was researching too, Artemis is also typically seen as a fertility symbol,
Yeah.
but she's also a virgin goddess, which I thought was really interesting because how can a virgin represent fertility and motherhood? But I think it's the unreleased potential power to create life that they're choosing that brings in that fertility. Because, let's be real, typical association in mind, virgin, fertile, yeah, you know what I'm saying? So I think that's kind of one of the reasons it kind of gets linked together, because when I think of Hestia too, I think of like protector of the home and the hearth. And then you also look at Hera, who is a mom, but she doesn't have those traits as a mother. And it's kind of like, I just found so many different paradoxes when researching this that I was like, I could dive into each and every one of these, but I don't have the time.
So do you feel like all the different goddesses like combined together equals like the various traits of womanhood? Like if you put them all,
Honestly,
and they have.
yeah,
That's pretty good.
that's a really great way to put it. She's a genius. Carmen?
I understand that your research is more you're looking at ancient things. Have you explored Athena in a modern context? And anything, not specifically in the research, but through like literature and contemporary adaptation?
Yeah, so one book that I read that kind of drew me to this topic originally too was Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes. And it details Athena and Medusa and her punishment of her. And because in some books you see Athena portrayed as just very wise but kind, but then in this Stone Blind context, it gives an insight into her eternal narrative, and that like that's how I feel Athena is portrayed, where she's kind of like weird and awkward in a way. And when I found that in my research, I went, yes. But I also thought it was interesting how myths get interpreted differently, because the Medusa myth, for example, in ancient contexts, it was Medusa was sexually assaulted by Poseidon in her temple, and she was mad that the integrity of her temple was compromised. So she punished Medusa because she thought it was her fault. But in a more modern context, we look at it and say, oh, Athena was protecting Medusa by making sure a man never looks at her again. So I thought it was interesting just looking at how everything evolves over time and how we as modern audiences can still relate to these myths, but we see it in a different light than these ancient civilizations.
Do you think there's like a connection between her masculinity and her like punishment of the more female roles like Arachne and Medusa?
Well, and like I said, she favored men heavily, because she is the protector of heroes, and there are no female heroes. So she's gonna prefer the men over the women immediately, especially since